And we are live.
All right, I will get us kicked off. It is Monday, October 26th, and this is the Finance Committee. We will need to make a motion to excuse Ms. Cheney. If I could have a motion to excuse Ms. Cheney.
So motioned.
And I will second. And all those in favor?
Aye.
All right. We will adopt and set the agenda. Any additions, changes? If not, I need a motion to set the agenda and adopt.
Sorry, if you can just hold on 1 second, I'm pulling it up again right now. Running a little behind, my apologies. Okay, motion to adopt.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, minutes from September 14th, 2020 Finance Committee for approval. I'll make a motion to approve. I need a second.
Yeah, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we will jump right into it. Mr. Lanzer with the financial packet for September of 2020.
Okay, the September financial packet. So for the month of September 2020, the village has an adjusted bank balance of $2.8 million. Of this, approximately $2.6 million rests in the village's primary checking account, with the remaining balance residing in the village's two law enforcement supplemental funds. As mentioned in previous financial reports, the vast majority of the $2.6 million found in the village's primary checking account actually resides in several dedicated road and street funds, including the street levy, and those resources can only be used for those dedicated purposes. In September, the village had 77 payments clear in the amount of $197,000. The top 5 payment payees for September fiscal year 20 were to payroll in the amount of $70,000, Ohio Police and Fire Pension in the amount of $22,000, Rumpke Container in the amount of $18,000, Cozy, which is the employee health insurance, in the amount of nearly $16,000, and OPERS in the amount of approximately $11,000. As for village receipts, the village received 31 payments totaling $695,000. The largest sources of revenue over this period include the second half property taxes, which totaled $523,000, and $81,000 came to the village from RETA in the form of income tax receipts. As for the general fund, revenue for the month of September was $424,000. This figure is approximately $305,000 more than what the village generated over the same period last year. The reasons for this are twofold. First, as I mentioned previously, the village received the second half property taxes from Hamilton County. For the general fund, this was $298,000. As a result, total village property tax receipts for fiscal year 20 stand at $658,000, and this figure is $62,000 more than what was forecasted and nearly 10% more than what the village generated during all of fiscal year 19. So in terms of property taxes, there's good signs there. The second cause for the increase in general fund revenues for September fiscal year 20 was due to an increase in income tax receipts for the month. In total, the village received $84,000 in September of 20. This is more than $41,000 more than what the village received during September of last year. Total village income tax receipts for the year through September, now stand at $650,000, which is $27,000 more than what the village had received through September of last year. So at this time, the village is on track to exceed income tax revenue forecasts for fiscal year 20. Later, I can talk about where income tax receipts and revenues are generally through October 26th, and I'm happy to do that. As for appropriations, the village spent $145,000 during September of 2020. This figure is a slight increase from what was spent by the village during September of last year, and approximately $12,000. However, total village general fund spend for the year remains significantly below that from the previous year. We were spending approximately $73,000 less than what we spent through September of last year. Village administration continues to anticipate a decline in total village spend through the end of the year when compared to that from last year. Again, this is the result of strategic reorganization of village personnel and the implementation of strict purchasing and spending controls from village departments in an effort to protect the village resources in response to the impact of COVID-19 on the local economy. That is the end of my report. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Do we have any projections? I know that this is for September and we're heading towards the end of October. Any projections towards what the end of the year might look like for like a carryover to be able to add to the reserve?
Well, it's hard to do because I can tell you what's in UAN at this time. If you give me 1 second. In terms of revenue, let me begin with revenue because I have that readily available. We've through October 26th, we've accumulated 98% of what our revenue forecasts were. So that includes a $62,000 increase in property taxes, and we are only $2,300 short of what income tax revenue forecasts were going to be. So I fully expect between November and December, we're going to soar right past the $715,000 income tax receipt level. Now,
Good. It's good to see that the income revenues have stayed relatively, flat and gone up. I know that at the beginning of the year we were really concerned about that towards March. So it's nice to see. Hopefully that means that not a lot of folks in Gulf Manor have been affected, with job loss and things like that, and the employers in the village as well.
Yeah. So right now in the general fund, we have just over $1 million in the general fund, but we still have several more payrolls and health insurance. I can get that number for you, but that's where we're at right now. I have to track it on a
Not urgent. Was just curious. I always at the end of every year, I always just kind of wonder where we're going to end up.
Yeah, I think we're going to end up growing the reserve a little bit. To what degree I don't know offhand. I'm hesitant to say without having my my tools in front of me to look at. But I think we're going to be in a better position to start 2020 than we were to begin 2021 than we were to begin 2020.
Great. Awesome. Mr. Pridnoff, any questions on your end over the financial packet?
No, I mean, I connected with Andy earlier this month, and we got a few questions that I had clarified. Definitely very, very happy with the packet, and obviously it's good news when revenues are up.
And expenses are down.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So one of the things that's going to help us in 2021 is there are some things that in response to COVID and COVID funding that's been available to us, we are going to be in a better position going into 2021 because of some capital purchases made. Every little bit helps. So if our revenue continues to track with property values raising, hopefully this gives us some glimmer of the beacon on the hill that our financial problems are not going to be as dire as we have been in the past. I would caution this committee, though, that if we wish to do more than what we're currently doing, we have to find a way to grow revenue And the the most expedient way to do that is to work on economic development. And I would urge council and the mayor to work with us to try and keep from having distractions that keep us from doing that. And number one goal for us for next year, which we had slotted for this year, but COVID, is we want to engage with a professional organization to help us develop a master plan. We will do that in concert with council. But once we have that plan, that will allow us to see the things that we want to concentrate on going forward. So safety, infrastructure, financial stability, we're meeting those goals. The next thing that's going to allow us to do the nice stuff that we'd like to do is going to be to increase revenue.
So I guess just in that vein, Ron, if I can ask, I know that there was in previous years certain blighted properties you've mentioned that the village had acquired. Is there any continued effort to acquire these? I mean, I'm sure there is. I'm just not aware of it. But maybe you can explain like what else is going on in terms of trying to clean up those blighted properties and acquire them for the village. Is that something which is actively being pursued?
So that is it. It is. However, because of the limited amount of funding that's available from the state and from the county, we have to pick and choose what's going to be most advantageous for us to pursue.
Sorry, can I interrupt you? What was the limitation you said from the state and county?
A lack of funds. So when
In order to purchase?
Correct. So we don't have it in our general fund or in our funding to be able to purchase large parcels of property. So to do that, we're dependent on working with Ohio or with Hamilton County Budget and Planning or with the Port Authority to be able to obtain funding. Those are relationships that we're starting to develop and that will continue to grow over the next few years. And those will come to fruition when we actually have funding to be able to make some of those purchases.
So what I'm understanding is that would be the effort there is that Gulf Manor is going to approach the owners of these properties and just try and purchase them directly?
We would, correct.
Okay.
When we have the money.
When is the next round? Isn't it every 3 years with Hamilton County Auditor, the next round of property tax evaluations? We're getting pretty close to that too.
Well, they do evaluations every year. They do what they call the hard evaluation every 3 years. 2020 was that year, but I'm quite certain because of COVID, they haven't done that. They've really not given any guidance as to when that will happen again. One of the things that the auditor does is when you see properties, for instance, that might have been valued 15 years ago at $80,000, if it's been renovated and sold for $150,000, that becomes the new valuation on the property, unless the homeowner goes in and appeals that when they get the property tax evaluations at the beginning of the year. So I would think that we're going to see, with the amount of renovation that's going on in the village, that number reflects some of the additional income that we're getting. I don't think we're going to see incremental leaps in revenue because of property or income tax. That's why we really need to concentrate on finding other sources of producing revenue. Andy, did you and I talk about this all the time? Did you have anything to add to that discussion?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. We are seeing property tax revenues increase slightly. They're modest, but I think that the village should develop a plan, a strategic plan that identifies what properties to buy that are in the village's interests, and a plan to develop those that's comprehensive and aligned with the goals, the short-term and long-term goals of the village. I think short of doing that, we aren't I think having a strategic plan is a proactive way to go about economic development. And if we can complete that hopefully next year or get the ball rolling next year, I think it's one step closer to helping the village achieve its economic potential.
One thing, I'm not typically a proponent of it, but I would be curious if there were resources where we could tap into, is the tax abatements for improvements. I know like Norwood's doing it and City of Cincinnati is doing it. So, and these developers are buying up property. I don't think we have an issue with developers buying property and flipping it, because it's, all the properties that are blighted or that go on the market for less than 100,000 are sold the same day. But I would be curious as to, if that's something that could work in our favor. I don't think we really need it, but just something in our back pocket if we wanted to consider it. I think it's a short-term solution, creates a longer-term problem, but something to look at as well.
Would that be more in the business district?
Could be either way. I mean, so,
there's different models. So I know some communities under home rule choose to do some more bedroom type communities, which Gulf Manor clearly is a bedroom community. They provide abatements for residential properties as well. I think the big challenge, and I'm not sure how big of a challenge it is, but in speaking with representatives from other communities, the challenge that exists is you have to get the school district to be on board. And sometimes that's a challenge.
So when we have people approach us regarding new businesses, there are two examples that did not come to fruition. We had someone who was interested in the old Cuisine West property. We also had somebody who was interested in the old bread factory there at the corner of Lasanaville and Weehee. We put them in touch with Hamilton County Development, and there are various financing programs that are available, and the county will actually help anybody who's interested in a new business walk through that process for funding and for tax abatement. Had those come to fruition, that was something that would have been a next step to talk with council about, because we do have the ability to make those kinds of concessions to new businesses coming into the village. I don't think we're going to see that happen much as we have people who are acquiring existing properties. What I think our greatest opportunity is to deal with some of the vacant land or blighted buildings that are existing on Weehee Road. And that's really where our concentration is to be at this time.
Cool.
Am I understanding correctly? That's almost entirely north of Losantiville?
That would be one of the many areas that we would look at on Weehee.
All right. The year-to-date revenue overview, I knew we kind of covered that, but was there anything else additional?
Nothing, in terms of the general fund, like I mentioned before, we've received 98% of revenue forecasts. So we have an outstanding budget balance of approximately $36,000, which I suspect we're going to zoom right past in November when we get the next round of RETA income tax payments. But in terms of, we have a $2,000 balance in income tax. Again, we're $62,000 to the good in general fund property taxes, up close to $9,000 in local government distributions. So we're right there. The biggest outstanding revenue balance is from Rumpke, but that's a scheduling thing, and it's $43,000, and we'll get that by the end of the year. So in terms of revenue, the village I think is in pretty good shape, especially given the concerns we've had dating back to February when our partners in forecasting forecasted a pretty dire financial situation for a lot of municipalities across the state of Ohio, including Gulf Manor. But despite all that, like I said, we've retained 98% of income or revenue. And again, I suspect we're going to fly right past that in November.
Great. All right. Reappropriations for 2020 COVID funding.
Yeah, so the village received another round of CARES Act funding, I believe, from the state of Ohio. So for consideration this evening, administration is requesting once again that we amend appropriations. Again, as has occurred previously, the village is eligible for and has received an additional inflow of revenues from the state in order to offset potential revenue losses as a result to the local response to COVID-19. The village received an additional $128,000 from the state. However, in order to use these resources, a new fund must be established in the village's internal accounting system, UAN, and the resources must be accounted for as additional revenues and appropriated accordingly. So it's the intention of village administration to do so and make these resources available for immediate village use. Again, as with previous resources received by the state as part of the CARES Act, the use of these resources is time limited and must be spent or returned to the state no later than January 1st, 2021.
So what do you need from us as a recommendation to approve the appropriations?
I believe so, yes.
I will make a recommendation to reapprove, or to, excuse me, to approve the reappropriations for 2020 COVID funding. Do I have a second?
I was going to say, does that require, yes, second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Wow.
Rosie agrees.
I was going to say somebody did.
Sorry. There's kids out in the front yard. All right, I think the motion carried. All right, so COVID grant funding, separate bullet.
So there are a number of projects that I will have a list of at the next council meeting that we've completed. Anna, who's online with us this evening, has been working with the reporting that's required of Hamilton County. So a couple of things that we've talked about, because of the time frame and the amount of work that's involved to meet the deadline, the rules of this funding continues to change, sometimes on a daily basis. And that being the case, there may be some funding that we've received that we won't have the ability to spend. There was one reimbursable fund of around what was it, Anna, $58,000, I believe?
52,000. It was 52.
The 52,000 that council approved at the last council meeting with the contract with the county. That particular fund is all reimbursable. So we have to expend the money out of our own coffers, and then we submit all of the documentation and paperwork to get that money back. One of the things that we have looked into, and the county administrator is going to get back to us, fire districts like the Little Miami Fire District are not considered entities that are eligible for any of this COVID funding that's becoming available. That being the case, the district, I should say, is our first responder when it comes to COVID issues. So we raised the question that if there are funds in our individual communities that we are not going to be able to use, and they end up being earmarked to go back to the federal government, do we have the ability to recommend or have some type of mechanism to be able to send those dollars to our fire district to be able to be distributed towards their COVID efforts? Interestingly enough, the assistant administrators of the county were aware of that situation, and hopefully we were hoping to get an answer on that last week, but if indeed that does become the case, that it looks like there's funding that we're not going to use, we will partner with council to make you aware of that and give you recommendations, and then if there's a mechanism of some sort, we'll advise. I would imagine that it would be I don't know, Andy, I'm assuming that there would be some motion of council to spread that money around if necessary. We just don't know. Nobody's thought about that. Kind of late in the game here, but I know the fire district would probably appreciate having the ability to get some reimbursement on their funding.
All right. Appropriations for 2021.
Yeah, I believe at the next finance meeting, we will have 2021 appropriation recommendations for approval. Starting to work on those now. I was waiting a little bit to see what revenues where revenues would be, because that would really determine where we go in terms of appropriations. But again, revenues look like they're coming in strongly, especially given the dire conditions from earlier this year. But we will have the 2021 appropriations for approval at the next, Rod, is it the next council meeting or the next finance meeting?
The next finance meeting on November 23rd. So
Yeah, the goal is to get those approved at that last November meeting, so we don't have to have a special session in December.
So the appropriations process allows us to spend money starting January 1st. So if council did not appropriate that money for 2021, we wouldn't be able to do paychecks or spend any essential money for services or so forth. What had been done in the past is we have a tax budget for 2021 for which we had a public hearing and then council approved that. We simply could just appropriate the tax budget, but we have found as a best practice, Andy's going to go through the budgets with the department heads and look at revenues and look at what we're anticipating for 2021 to make sure that anything that we approve for appropriations fall in line with what our expectations are next year. The nice thing about that is that also having that done in November gives the opportunity to get the accounting process and UAN and other details taken care of prior to the beginning of the next year. So that's all helpful. That way we're not winging it at the very end of the year.
All right. HSA program for employee contributions.
Yes, that next,
Sorry, employee continuation. I'm sorry.
we love her, so she's fine. That's Matt's Great Dane Rosie weighing in on our meeting.
She scares the bejesus out of me when she woofs like that.
So we have a healthcare savings account program that was approved by council 2 years ago. It runs in the calendar year, so council last weighed in on that program in December of last year, so it expires at the end of 2020. We see making no change in that program at this point, and we're going to ask council at that last meeting in November to go ahead and approve that program through 2022.
All right. Do you need us to make that recommendation to council or anything?
Not at this time.
Okay. Any old business? Announcements, next committee meeting being scheduled for Monday, November 23rd at 6 o'clock for 2021 appropriations. Other than that, I need a motion to adjourn.
So motioned.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
See you at 7.